Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of Monday, November 22nd, 2021. We have a quorum, so we can get, I guess we need a roll call.
We don't.
We don't. Oh,
We're not on.
okay. Then the first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of September 27th, but we actually already approved those at our October meeting. Apparently our meeting software didn't pick up the October 25 minutes that were prepared by staff, but we'll deal with those at our next meeting. So then we move on to our first. I'm going to take public comment as we get to each item. So the first item is P1, Ordinance 120-0-21, granting a special use permit for a convenience store, Dempster Snack Shop at 1806 Dempster Street in the B1 Business District. Would someone, I move that for introduction.
Second for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. We have some discussion. Councilmember Nusma.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do have some concerns about this proposal.
Oops, I'm sorry, we have a public comment. We have the applicant.
Okay.
Should we, yeah. So would the applicant like to make a public comment?
Hey, how you doing? I'm Danielle Dean. I'm just here trying to just see what all you guys need on my end.
Mm-hmm. Is that,
Okay.
do you want to tell us about your proposal?
Okay, so about my proposal is basically I'm trying to run like a little small neighborhood convenience store, somewhere where they can just, come get bread, garbage bags, little small household items. I'm very familiar with the community. I have worked with a lot of people in that neighborhood. I also own a fitness studio where I've been open for 9 years. I was in Skokie for 7 years. I've been on Howard Street for 2 years. So I have a huge following. I know a lot of people in the neighborhood, and I'm an entrepreneur. So, I seen something that I feel that might fit that community, and guys told me in my heart to follow. So I was looking at basically a small convenience store.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councilmember Nusma.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm concerned about a clause in the ordinance relating to the sale of tobacco products in this store. And the way the clause is written, I'll just read it. The sale of tobacco products must be less than the total sales revenue. So that is essentially meaningless. And I don't think we want this to turn into a smoke shop. I don't think Mr. Dean has a smoke shop in mind when he's planning on opening this business.
I'll let you finish. No, there's no, I'm not a smoke shop at all. Nowhere near a smoke shop. I'm familiar with, basically the ordinance over there, and that's not something that I'm trying to promote, just in all honesty. So I'll give it to you like that. That's not nothing that I'm trying to promote. Yeah. Just trying to have something, like I told you. I grew up in them neighborhoods, so it's like I pretty much know all the store owners. So it amazes me sometimes to where it's like, man, I'm kind of like in that position now. And that's all I'm trying to bring, is like a little family corner store. It's me, my little cousin, and my daughter. So I'm not a fire tobacco shop. That's pretty much way out my picture.
Yep. Right. Councilmember Nusma.
But you are planning to sell tobacco.
I know a lot of people that smoke cigarettes, blunts, but it's not like going no further than that.
Yeah, I understand. Given the proximity of your store to a school, and it's far enough away that it doesn't fall within the red zone of the ordinance, but I'm uncomfortable with the ordinance as written. So I think this needs a little bit more work before I'm ready to vote in favor of it.
Okay, I don't, like I say, I'm here to find out what I need to do. To be honest with you, I'm new to this as well. So as far as the learning process, I'm enjoying that part. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I'm not in disagreement to anything that you're saying. I'm here to learn at the same time. So whatever rules and regulations, that's what I want to follow. So
Yeah, well, yeah, we appreciate that, and the first time through these processes it's complicated.
yeah,
So-
I got over that.
So Councilmember Nusma, do you have a proposal?
I think it would make sense if we held this to allow Mr. Dean some additional time to work with staff to address this particular concern.
Okay.
So I would like to make a motion that we table this until our first meeting in January.
Second.
Okay. And I believe we have, this is debatable, I think. I ought to look at my rules. Are everybody ready for a vote on this? Councilmember Suffredin.
So, what's the goalpost here? No tobacco at all? A lower percentage of sales? I mean, tobacco is a legal product that we tax.
Yeah, the goalpost is ideally no tobacco. I'm not trying to forbid tobacco in this particular location, although I would not be unhappy for the shop to not sell tobacco. But we don't want it to turn into a smoke shop, and as written, it could. So I just want to, I want to impose whatever limitations are reasonable to make sure that this does not turn into a smoke shop.
All right. I guess it's a question for Mr. Dean then. Does this delay cost you money?
It's delaying a lot of things. Like, I'm still paying rent right now. But like I say, the process is the process. So that's just something that I got to go through. But in all honesty, I'm not understanding it when it's a guy around the corner that sells smoke and pretty much doing more than what I'm even trying to do. Like I told you, I'm trying to run more of a convenience store. And all I can really do is give y'all my word. You know, I mean, I'm for sure y'all do inspections and things of that nature, to where it's like a lot of stores around there. I'm not trying to do nothing more or nothing less. You know, like I told you, I'm new to this. And again, it's very frustrating. I've been paying rent since August.
Okay.
I think we have Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I'll exchange information with Mr. Dean, since it is a project in my ward, and work closely to the owner to make sure that he's in compliance with the understanding of this committee as well as our ordinances.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I mean, I guess I just want to kind of second the Councilmember Suffredin's question. I know there's a convenience store on Church and Dodge that because it's closeness to HHS right across the street. You know, we've prohibited, I believe, the sale of tobacco there. But I just want to make sure that we're applying whatever our ordinance is fairly and evenly, and not creating kind of arbitrary standards for certain businesses. If there's a certain distance away from a school that the sale of tobacco is prohibited, then it shouldn't happen. But we get in a very hairy place when we're allowing one business to do it that is of a certain distance away from a school and not another one. So that's a little hairy for me, and I just want to be upfront with that. I want to make sure we're applying the ordinance evenly, unless we're just going to say we're not allowing it at all in Evanston, and that's a different discussion. Thank you.
Well, I kind of assumed maybe Councilmember Nusma meant that we would revise it to say something like less than 50% of the total revenues, or something, so that we knew that it wasn't going to be, dominated by tobacco
Given the fact that there
sales.
is a smoke shop around the corner, we don't want another one in that neighborhood. I don't think that's Mr. Dean's intention, but
right.
if he sells the business, we want something that we can enforce. So I would be in favor of limiting the sales of tobacco in some manner that's legally acceptable, whether that's percentage of sales or percentage of floor space, display space.
And just to be clear about smoke shop, you're talking about what do you mean when you say smoke shop? And that's a different, that will require different steps to be taken, right?
I'm not sure. I guess that's a question for staff.
It's a shop around the corner on Dodge that
A convenience store is a special use, so you may it's the council's prerogative to put whatever conditions based on two lots are created the same, based on staff's concern. For both of the Dodge, staff had concern for both the Dodge convenience store and this one for the backup of traffic that could be created for people running in and out. Those are both tight spots. We have not observed any issues on Dodge or have received any 311s. We do receive complaints and concerns about the Starbucks. That seems to have a bigger impact on that intersection, but we haven't received any about the Dodge. So we
And
express.
if you pay attention, excuse me, I'm not trying to cut you off, just why it's on my mind. But even if you pay attention to my floor plan, you'll see that I only have a small corner. I don't have like a big display right here saying, hey, we got this type of smoke product and we got this. I got a small corner right there. So it's like, look at the floor plan, it'll show you, give you an idea of what type of, how much smoked tobacco that I'm gonna have in there.
I guess I just need, and I don't mind doing this offline, to get a better sense of what the current regulations are around
Right.
the distance between where, needed between, the sale of tobacco in schools or any other factor.
So it's 150 feet lot line to lot line for no sale of tobacco within 150 feet
I'm way over that.
of the lot line of ETHS to the lot line of any establishment that would sell it. So the corner store at Church and Dodge is definitely within less than 150
It's only
feet.
ETHS or it's any school, right?
Elementary, middle, or high school in Evanston.
And so that's special use or no special use. That's just what it is.
That's a tobacco.
You can't
that's
even apply
that's selling
for
tobacco.
a special use if you don't meet that.
Right, so he's not
Okay.
applying for the special use because he's selling tobacco. He's applying for the special use because our zoning code says a convenience store, which is what he's determined to want to do here based on our zoning review. That's a special use.
And selling tobacco is determined by the distance. And
It's
maybe some
a
other-
license, so it's like similar to a food license.
Okay.
You might have different ways that you'd sell the food, catering, type 1, type 2, vending machines. I mean, those all require some kind of food license.
Okay, but to be clear, that part is not a special use. Typically, we've just applied it as if it's within 100, if it's outside of 150 feet, it's permitted.
If you meet
Or you'll get
if you meet the
license.
license requirements, you can sell tobacco.
Okay. And so what do we ask? So since it's outside of 150 feet, have we done this before where we're considering restricting it further?
I'd have to look at I think there was a restriction on the Dodge one that's around the corner. I think there was some, it might be similar, I don't know about the wording, but somewhere along the lines of tobacco sales can't exceed the total sales of the store. And I think it's supposed to read less the sale of tobacco. So it's, as Council Member Newsma made a point, you could just sell tobacco and a pack of gum for an entire year and you've met the requirements of that. So I think it's less tobacco sales. It basically can't be the majority of the things that you're selling.
And I just want to be clear to the Fifth Ward residents, I am not someone, I don't suggest that anybody smoke tobacco. I just want to be clear on that. I've have people in my family that have had strokes and other illnesses because of it. So I would advise no one to do it. That being said, the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I want to make sure that we're not applying anything unevenly and unfairly against this gentleman who's trying to open up a business that he has the right to open up, and I wish him success in doing that. So I'll hold my comments for now.
I note that this is for introduction.
Right.
I wonder if, hypothetically, I retracted my motion to hold, we approved this for introduction, and then allowed Mr. Dean to work with staff to address this particular clause. And if we come to an agreement on some other kind of meaningful restriction on percentage of sales or floor space, I would be comfortable with that if my colleagues would be.
Just point of timeline here.
Yeah.
We don't have much staff here this week because of the holiday.
Yeah.
And everything has to be done basically by midweek next week to prepare for the 13th packet. So
Okay.
that doesn't leave us much time to work through. I think that's why we would suggest pushing. I'm not sure you're going to, I'm happy to do that if that's what the will of the council is, but we may come back to you without any resolution and you may now then have something for action that didn't get the resolution you wanted. So that's just so you know, this holiday week gets in the way of doing our jobs.
You're talking to me, right?
So Councilmember Suffolk.
Yeah, is it possible to just make an amendment tonight and say, whatever the 50% threshold is, and put Mr. Dean in a position where he can get going on opening his business? I think pushing it off really seems like it's burdensome, or he's got expenses and no money coming in. I mean, would you be comfortable with, say, what, 50% or whatever number it is that you have in mind? Why don't we
I just pulled that out of the air.
Yeah, or I mean, whatever it is, I don't know. I mean, I share Bobby's concern about, if we don't want tobacco within 5,000 feet of a school, then we should make that the ordinance. I mean, it seems like Mr. Dean's trying to open a store and sell legal products. We should welcome it and encourage it rather than have him spin his wheels till the 6th. What would be satisfactory and get this thing rolling? I mean, I don't know Mr. Dean, but I'm going to assume.
Yeah, I was initially told that as long as it wasn't 50% of my sales. So that's where I have been comfortable at, because I'm not, like I say, I don't have no other type of intentions on mine. Like as well, I don't really want to promote smoking, but people smoke. Like I say, you can look me up as Diesel Elite Boot Camp. You'll see you're going to see over 100 or something reviews of the type of person that I am and really what I bring to the table, man.
So if we limited it to 25% of sales, would that be comfortable with you, Mr. Dean?
Let's meet me at 35, 40.
So.
I mean, I'm trying to do business too. Like, not to bring nothing personal up, but I got kids and grandkids. And like I say, I'm trying to do business, man. Like, I go to the meetings with the 8th Ward. So it's like I'm very familiar. This is something new to me. And it's a great learning experience, And I thank you guys for welcoming me, And just trying to do good business, man. Bring something to the neighborhood.
Right, yep.
I don't see myself different than what I've been seeing going on since I've been a kid. Like I told you, I know Babylon, I know every store around there. So it's like, I'm, kind of shocked too, because I don't see nothing different that I'm doing. And then if I'm 150 feet, I'm way over that.
Right, yeah.
Then it's like being the guy around the corner, not trying to bring him in, but we got the same amount of distance.
Okay,
So,
yeah, thank
and he
you.
had a shop. I'm not trying to do all of that.
Right, okay, Councilmember Burns.
No, I was just going to say, if Director Knighton recalls 50%, I think that's fair. And I mean, as a practical matter, if you get above 25%, what do you just stop? You just tell people when they come in, I've reached my threshold for this month, so I don't even know practically how that works. But that aside, I mean, if you recall 50%, I think 50% is fair.
Would someone like to make that
Parity is important
motion?
to me. We don't want to, again, place these arbitrary restrictions on businesses that makes it difficult for them to compete.
Right.
So if it's 50% down the street, it should be 50% for this business.
I don't think we know what it is down the street is the problem.
Director Knighton, y'all have some good memories.
I haven't been able to look.
Okay.
But if you want, we could find out between now and City Council if you wanted to move this item along with an amendment.
So at the moment, we have a motion to table. Would anyone like to withdraw that motion and have a different motion? I guess it's up to the mover of the motion to, what is,
And Councilmember Newsom, I just want you to reflect on the parity part. Like, we can't say 25%
No, your
for him.
points are very well taken. Your
You're
points
right,
are very
yeah.
well
That's
taken.
just-
We don't want two smoke shops, around the corner from each other. I think that's, very much within the purview of the city council to rule on in the context of a planned development. And, so we don't, I truly believe Mr. Dean is not planning to convert his store into a smoke shop. However, as the ordinance is written, it could be, and that seems to be not prudent from the city's perspective to even allow that possibility. So I would like to close this up. And if there's an alternative proposal, I would entertain that. Unless it's whatever is the quickest way through this process. If that means withdrawing the motion to hold until January, we could work something out either tonight or before this comes back to council for action. I'd be happy with that.
okay, Councilmember Wynn, go ahead, Johanna.
I'm just remembering that the sale of tobacco must be less than 50%, because if it's more than 50%, then the store is automatically, it becomes a smoke shop, a tobacco shop. So, I'm sorry, that was a piece of this. So that's a convenience, he wouldn't be zoning compliant then. So to answer your question about what does he do at that point, he should probably stop selling.
It was a 25%.
Well, you can provide more restrictions as a special use, but to be zoning compliant, he cannot sell, if he wants to remain a convenience store, he has to sell less than 50% of his gross sales has to be tobacco products. So if he sells
Yeah, and I don't have a
51%,
problem.
then he's a tobacco shop. He's been approved as zoning wise as a convenience shop. That's a difference. He has to go through. I mean, we have people, as you know, zoning non-compliant. So then we would address that through other
No,
means.
my question was if we were to further kind of cap it at 25%. But I mean, that makes sense to me. And I think that also addresses your concern about it turning into a smoke shop.
Right,
Just by
right.
zoning, he wouldn't be able to at that
But-
point, so.
Also, with that additional explanation, it kind of, to me, it seems that this paragraph D in the ordinance is really kind of irrelevant.
Right, we should either strike it or amend it.
Right, yeah. And so, Councilmember Wynn, you had your light on.
Well, I was going to say, we could introduce it, find out the information, which actually Ms. Knighton has just presented to us. But I think that in order to make it a fair playing field with the store around the corner, we should, I think we should include the prescriptive language in the ordinance rather than strike it.
Right.
So that it's clear that 50% is the maximum amount of tobacco sales that you can have and remain a convenience store, rather than have it remain silent. And someone who gets a convenience store license has no idea that
Right.
that 75% of sales becomes tobacco, and now they're
Right.
out of compliance.
Yeah, it took us this whole discussion to get to that
To get to that
wonderful
point.
point, so.
I mean, I would support that,
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
So,
I'm comfortable.
Councilmember Newsma, would you like to withdraw your,
So I'll withdraw the motion to table this to a date certain. And if Councilmember Wynn would like to make a motion to amend,
Yeah. I would amend. You might have it.
condition D, or,
Section 3, Condition D.
Oops.
Uh,
Yeah, could you make it?
I can make, so I will make the motion to amend Section 3, Condition D, to read, the sale of tobacco products must be no greater than half of the total sales revenue.
Say 50%.
No greater than 50% of the total sales revenue.
Second. Sorry.
okay, so we now have a new motion to amend item D, that's the sale of tobacco products must be no greater than 50% of the total sales revenue. Is there more discussion on this item? Then I think we're ready for a roll call on the amendment.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
And then can we have a vote on the amended motion? So we would be approving, we would approve for introduction the ordinance for the Dempster snack shops special use with this amendment that the sale of tobacco products must be no greater than 50% of the total sales revenue. So we're ready for the vote, roll call.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Revelle?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Very educational discussion. We're now ready for item P2, and that's, I'll move just to get this introduced. Ordinance 123-0-21, granting a major adjustment in the plan development located at 1900 Sherman Avenue, and this is for introduction.
Second.
And I believe we have some public comment.
You do. All right. Claire Waitstall.
Good evening, council members. My name is Claire Waistel, and I live within 500 feet of the Perlman. The proposed reduction in on-site parking is listed as non-compliant in the Evanston zoning analysis. It was never a 1-to-1 ratio, so the reduction in units does not correspond to the loss of parking. The new proposal is just 25 spaces for a new 152-unit building. This is 3% of the city's requirement, and the applicants claim that they can provide the missing 62 spaces at a nearby building. Tonight's packet includes documentation of the number of spaces that exist at the Link and E2, but nothing about an agreement for a long-term lease. Commissioner Rogers shared that the Link submitted a zoning analysis to add a tower without adding parking, since they can use their currently available spaces. Therefore, the Link's garage cannot be counted on. That leaves E2. However, that building does not meet the distance requirements in last year's approval ordinance, which requires the parking spaces be within 1,000 feet. E2 parking is 1,500 feet away and requires a 6 to 7 minute walk. I will email you 2 maps to support my numbers. I would also love to meet at the site with any council members to show you concerns with LA safety and with this walk. Accessibility is a major concern. The parking study required 71 spaces, and Illinois requires 3 accessible spots. However, they plan for 1. No one answered my question during the Plan Commission meetings, so I wrote for clarification from the city and was told that the accessible spaces are based on the total number the council requires to be on site. These accessible spots do require more space, so a new configuration and a new total number of parking spaces would be required in order to improve the ordinance before you tonight. I hope you agree with me that this is a problem that as council members you can fix to provide adequate accessibility. The Plan Commissioners would only consider the 3 adjustments submitted by the applicant and not the underlying cause for the adjustments. They stated, though, that as council members, you have greater purview for what you can discuss and that you could even send the project back to them at Plan Commission to evaluate the new design and the possible 10 to 12 foot building separation. The developers have controlled the conversation so far because their application did not include the cause for the adjustments. The cause was only listed in the letter with their permit extension that was submitted to you. That letter identified that a year ago, a structural condition in the design and the foundation of the existing Perlman building was discovered. Yet it appears no one at the city has evaluated the new foundation plan, nor its potential impact on the safety of the existing Perlman building. At the September DAPR meeting, Councilmember Kelly asked a question, and Ms. Knight stated that they only evaluate the completeness of the application. It is up to council to evaluate the project. I can't believe that as busy council members were able to add structural analysis to your list of things to do. So instead, I am asking each of you to advocate for the residents of the Perlman. The Housing Authority itself owns that building, so there is no other building owner to request an independent analysis of the possible impact on the Perlman's foundation. In closing, please reevaluate the number of accessible parking spaces on site, and please send this project back to the Plan Commission to determine the impact of the new building design and the effect of the 10 to 12 foot separation on zoning and foundation safety for the Perlman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cecil McHugh.
Hello, this is Cecile McHugh. I live within 500 feet of 1900 Sherman, and I have some miscellaneous comments on several areas, beginning with the zoning change issue. A zoning change was granted to HAC based upon claims by HAC that they could not build their development with a 10 to 12 foot separation between the building that their previous zoning R6 required, but the zoning they asked for, C1A, did not require. HAC stated the need for a 10 to 12 foot separation as the primary reason they asked for a zoning change. However, the design HAC is now proposing does have a 10 to 12 foot separation. Please investigate and reconsider this zoning change approved under a premise proven to be false. One commissioner at the last Plan Commission meeting expressed concern about the matter and indicated that this should be looked into, but I believe felt that following through on this was the purview of the council members. Regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance, additionally, HAC is being given huge allowances for the number of units, building height, FAR, parking, for meeting the requirements of Evanston's inclusionary housing ordinance, which contains the basic requirement that Evanston residents be given priority for affordable units. As many know, HAC does not prioritize Evanston residents and is not legally allowed to do so. HAC therefore does not meet Evanston's IHO. I recently reviewed a video in which I believe Richard Minocchio from HAC said that 80% of HAC's units go to the immediate and adjacent communities. I'm requesting that the city obtain a written statement from HAC reporting the percentage of residents expected to obtain HAC's affordable units that are from Evanston, and that HAC be required to provide a correspondingly larger percentage of affordable units to offset the fact that only a fraction of their units go to Evanston residents before they qualify for the inclusionary housing ordinance bonus. The fact that HAC does not prioritize Evanston residents was perhaps not an issue in the past when HAC's developments were 100% affordable units, but this is an issue beginning with this development, HAC's venture into for-profit, primarily luxury developments. Going on to parking and traffic issues. As Commissioner Rogers stated at the last Plan Commission meeting, off-site parking leased at the link can't be relied upon considering a zoning analysis has been requested for an expansion of the link. The only other possible site for off-site parking HAC mentioned is at E2, but parking at E2 does not meet Evanston's requirement that off-site parking be within 1,000 feet. E2 is also problematic to get to, requiring crossing a high-traffic alley, an access driveway for garbage trucks, and 2 crosswalks, 2 streets, to get to the boundary of the E2 lot. All of this is especially dangerous for seniors, especially in the dark and in fall weather. These seniors must then also walk to their target parking spot on the huge lot. The plan does not provide the required accessible parking places. Off-site parking places are by definition not accessible. The updated parking study presented by HAC, I'm nearly done, thank you, used the parking utilization of the link as a comparable, as if the parking utilization of a senior luxury development would parallel the parking utilization of what is essentially a private student dorm, the link, 2 blocks from campus. Please disregard the parking study provided by HAC and either use the City of Evanston's determination that HAC should provide 88 net new parking places or commission another parking study. And again, these off-site parking places must be leased somewhere within 1,000 feet of the proposed site with a long-term lease approved by the city. While traffic studies provided by developers state their developments do not cause undue traffic, there is bumper-to-bumper traffic regularly along Emerson. Please commission an independent study of traffic here before an additional mega development is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Lolbach.
Sue Lolbach.
Hello, I'm Sue Lolbach with Connections for the Homeless and with Joining Forces for Affordable Housing. Just very briefly, I would urge you to support the amendments proposed for the Emerson building tonight. This is a really innovative, strong proposal that the council unanimously approved when it was first proposed. The changes that are being made are sort of just the normal course of business as any developer gets into the detail. Some things will be unexpected and they adapt, and that is what the Housing Authority is doing. I would really urge you to not let these new objections to the building create more obstacles, more hoops for the Housing Authority to jump through. There's already going to be just a challenge to get this done, and it is such an important building with a significant amount of affordable housing that I hope that you will not let the small number of people who live near the building and are object to it sort of overcome the support that this building is getting from the rest of the community, including many who live right near it. So I hope you will just support these amendments and that this can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Nobody else has signed up for P&D.
Okay. And we don't, no one in the room here is,
I'm sorry, I thought I did sign up.
okay. Mike Fasilko, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my comment is consistent with the first speaker about the parking. It's a ridiculously low amount of parking for a building that size, those number of units. And unless I misread it, I think they were only talking about moving, they're talking about having 25 spaces in the building and moving 12 spaces within 1,000 feet to some other leased arrangement. So that would only be a total of 37 spaces. So I'm curious if that's the right number or if they've committed to other quantity of parking. But either way, it's a low number. Structurally, there's ways of building more underground parking, but it's just more expensive, and I'm sure that's why they don't want to build it versus making excuses why they can't build it. Because if this is a senior housing development, which they propose that it is, there's going to be a lot of visitors, family members who come to visit, who need to be able to park somewhere. Not to mention people who live in the building. Some of them, probably a good number of them, are going to have some kind of a vehicle that needs to park, plus the staff, plus the caregivers, et cetera. So I think that's the big issue that needs to be solved before you approve this. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's all the public comment we have. And then I think, staff, do we have a presentation or?
Well, actually, the representatives from the Housing Authority are on, and they've incorporated the information that we would have otherwise put in the slides.
Okay.
So it would make it easier for one presentation.
Right, yes, okay. So are we ready there with a presentation then?
Thank you, Anderson.
We are ready at the Housing Authority. Megan has our presentation. I believe she was going to share screen.
Bill, it's up.
Okay. And can you make it full screen? I don't know if everybody can see it. It's a small image on my screen, but we can move forward with our presentation. So if you can go to the next slide, Megan.
Okay, so Bill, Megan's not here. Hold on one second. I just want to see, Sarah, why don't you advance the slides if that's possible?
Okay, so Sarah has control. Yeah, so this is our agenda. We're trying to make this a very simple, straightforward presentation. I think a lot of the comments that we've heard at the Plan Commission and here tend to complicate the matter, introducing really extraneous considerations that aren't germane to the action that we're requesting. This is our agenda. We're going to start with opening comments by HAC Executive Director Rich Minacchio. I will then frame the request that we're asking for, talk about the 3 refinements called major adjustments, why we're asking for these, and then drill down on the parking, which we think is the only substantive request that we're making, and then summarize what we're asking for. So, Rich, if you could make your opening remarks, please.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Thank you, members of the council, for having us back. I'll be brief. Because this has been considered for such a long time, I just thought I would remind everybody about the fundamentals of this project. And the fundamentals are that this building is going to provide more affordability downtown, I think by far, than any other building of its type, 51 apartments. And they are going to be 51 affordable units, 34 for very low income people who will wind up paying 30% of their income for rent. But just as important, 17 apartments for people of moderate means. And those 17 apartments have been committed to the city of Evanston and their AHO list. It's been said before that, Evanstonians won't live in the 34 units. Well, you know what? we're going to have a site-based waiting list like we do every place, and the site-based waiting list is going to be in Evanston. So it's true we can't guarantee that 100% of the residents will be Evanstonians, but a large percentage will be. The other thing that needs to be talked about here is this is a groundbreaking project, really. You know, I've heard a lot about this project from a lot of people, and the fact is, this is the ideal way to build such a building. We have land that's valuable in a very desirable part of town, so we're proposing a mixed income building, which makes total sense and is done every place in the country. And the beauty of this is the higher rents are going to subsidize the affordable units, okay? We're not asking for any development subsidy outside a very small percentage from IDA, but this is basically going to be built as a development project without millions and millions of dollars of subsidy there that aren't even there. So in that respect, it is novel, and it is forward-looking, and it is a great, it's going to be an architecturally significant building, and we hope a model for the rest of the county and the rest of the country. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Rich. So, Sarah, if you could go to the next slide after this, which is framing the request. So, we think it's very important to simplify the request that we're asking of City Council here today. You know, this is not an opportunity to revisit the original development approval action, which I think members of the public would like to see done here before the council. The original request was passed unanimously in November of 2020. The Housing Authority had every right in the world to just build it as it was approved, but the fact is that as the Housing Authority went into design development to create the plans needed to construct the building, there were some changes that needed to be made, and we are here asking the city to pass these. And in many communities, 2 of the 3 requests we're asking for would not even need approval from the elected body. It would be passed, approved by administratively by staff. The parking reduction would need to be acted on specifically. So actually the requests that we're asking for are really minor, as you will see. So the next slide talks about these 3 refinements. So major amendment 1 is to get City Council approval to reduce the number of dwelling units in the building from 168 to 152. That is a 16-unit reduction. We see no, public impact on this. We see no reason why this wouldn't be approved. But that is one of the adjustments that we must ask approval for by ordinance, because your ordinance very narrowly defines minor amendments to a plan development, and anything that's not a minor amendment becomes a major amendment. So even though we're asking for fewer units, this needs to be specifically acted by the City Council. Major amendment number 2 is to approve the reduction in building height from 172 feet 8 inches, which was approved in the drawing submitted with the plan development, to 168 and 4 inches. So this is merely just a minor design refinement. When plans developed for PD approval are conceptual, when we go into design development, things are just refined, and it turns out we don't need 172 8 inches. It'll be only 168 feet 4 inches, but we need approval from you to make that reduction. And then the third major amendment is to reduce on-site parking by 12 spaces. And we are going to talk about that in more detail and frame the impact of that on the public. So if we go to that the next slide. So this talks about the need for refinement. There are 3 things that are really causing this request for refinement. One is a foundation condition of the Perlman building. We anticipated that there would have been pilings that support the Perlman building foundation that would be typical of a building its size, but when HAC's engineers did due diligence, they found that was not the foundation design that was there. And in order to build the new building and the underground parking, we need a separation of 10 to 12 feet from the Perlman building. So if you go to the next slide, that shows that we needed to redesign the underground parking. We have less space, 12 less feet, impacts the design of the underground parking and reduces the number of spaces we could get to 25 from 37. So that is why we are asking for this. If it were denied and we had to build those additional 12 spaces and go another level down, it would be an astronomical cost. It would impact the project severely, might make it infeasible, and we think the astronomical cost for 12 spaces is not worth it, and we can provide those spaces off-site. So the next slide then talks about the adjustment in the number of units. So since we're coming in for a major amendment and COVID has struck and preferences among renters have shifted, as we know, the world will never be the same as it was pre-COVID. And people nowadays are wanting larger units with less common area, common amenities, so that they can feel safer and don't have to rely on spaces shared by people in the building. So HAC would like to reconfigure the floor plate so that there is one less space per floor, and we would have 16 less units in the whole building. Now, we are not reducing the affordable units at all, either the units for very low income or the missing middle units. So proportionately, we're increasing the affordability of the building by reducing it by 16 units, but keeping the affordable units the same. The next slide just talks about the very minor refinement in building height. We'll be changing the exterior facade very slightly. Reducing the number of units would make us change the location of balconies and other things and window placement. So there'll be a minor change in the facade of the building, but you see here the approved elevation and the proposed elevation. It will look essentially the same, and it's a very minor reduction in building height, but this kind of drives home what we're asking for. And then the next slide talks about on-site parking. So the original approval allowed us to have a certain number of on-site parking spaces and have an underground parking structure with 37 spaces. As I mentioned in one of the previous slides, due to the structural issue of the Perlman Foundation, we have to create a separation, and that will impact the number of underground spaces we can accommodate, reducing it by 12 to 25. So when we had our original approval, the Housing Authority produced a letter from the E2 building saying that they could commit to 50 spaces of off-site parking devoted to residents of the new building, the Emerson building, and the city accepted this as evidence that off-street parking was available to supplement the on-site spaces that would be built as part of the development. There was no requirement for hard and fast lease agreements or absolute commitments and all of that. So we are very confident that we can provide additional parking spaces at E2 or other off-site parking spaces within the 1,000-foot limit. People have said that the E2 is not within 1,000 feet. We did not, we being the Housing Authority, did not request a 1,000-foot limit. That was something that staff determined as an appropriate measurement for off-site parking within a certain distance of the building. Staff thought that the E2 building was within 1,000 feet. Our own consultants have measured it, from property line to property line, and we believe it is within 1,000 feet, contrary to what's been stated. But the 1,000 feet came from city staff. So, and in terms of the impact of a reduction in 12 spaces, we really must look at this in combination with the reduction of on-site units. So the parking study that we produced surveyed the utilization of structured parking at the E2 building and at the Link building, and roughly speaking, the utilization rate was 1/2 space per unit. That is, for every 2 units of occupied residential units, there was a need for 1 parking space in the parking structure. And so when we look at this and look at the reduction of units by 16 and apply that utilization rate of 0.5, that means that there will be actually 8 less parking spaces required by residents of this property, the Perlman and the New Emerson combined. So when we look at the reduction of parking spaces by 12, less the 8 spaces of reduced demand that we will generate, we see that there's really an additional need for 4 spaces off-site, accepting the prior approval and the reduction of 16 units in our building. So we think framing this in terms of the additional need for off-site spaces, we think that number is 4. So it's really a very minor request that we're asking for a reduction in 12 on-site spaces, coupled with the reduction of 16 units of residential apartments. So that, in our mind, frames the reduction in on-site parking that we're asking for. So the last slide talks about the summary of the requests. You know, reducing the number of units by 16. We don't think there's any public impact there. Reducing the height by approximately 4 feet. We don't see any public impact there. Reducing the on-site parking spaces by 12 in combination with the reduction of 16 units, we think will produce an additional demand of 4 more off-site spaces, which we think is negligible in terms of the available supply of off-site parking spaces at a number of locations. So for these reasons, we think this is a very simple request. It's not complicated. We don't think the sky is falling. We don't think that this is not about structural issues that the city council has to get involved in. And importantly, this is not the end of the city review and regulation of this development. The Housing Authority has made a number of promises to the city on a number of topics, including hiring of Evanston workers, bird-friendly design, public spaces at street level, public amenities, and all of these things the city can and will, I'm sure, hold HAC accountable for and perform on. Not to mention the normal process of going through building permit and providing additional documentation to substantiate the promises HAC has made with respect to this new development. So this is not the end of city review at all. And we think that the requests we're asking for are very modest and common sense. And we ask for your approval on these.
All right, thank you. So now we'll open it up to the committee for their discussion. And Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will support this building again, as I did in November of 2020, for a number of reasons. And these changes to me, well, worth discussing, as the presenters have indicated. 2 of them actually are making the building smaller. So I don't really think that they raise any questions with us. This, for all of the reasons we discussed in November 2020, one of the critical needs that we have in this community is for affordable housing for seniors. We hear this many, many times over, and this really gives us an opportunity to add 51 affordable units at once in our downtown. We haven't had a project like that ever, as far as I can remember. I mean, we add 2s and 3s here and there, but this allows 51 units, and that is 1/3 of the units in this project. 1/3 of this building is going to be affordable to seniors. We can't possibly replicate that without using this model, as Mr. Minacchio was saying. Hack owns the property by creating by financing it by using market rate units, market rate rental units. They're then able to create the 51 units that are affordable. That far outweighs concerns about parking in the area. And I recognize that the community nearby might be concerned about that, and I understand that, certainly. The third ward arguably has the worst parking in the city of Evanston. And I'd like to just point out a couple of buildings in the third ward, in particular, the most recent building that was built is at the southeast corner of Main and Chicago. Tall, glassy building, very, very attractive. It's a rental building, approximately 112 units. They originally came to us and said that they did not want to have to put all of the parking that we required in our zoning ordinance in. We were very skeptical. It is transit-oriented development, and we required them to rent a lot within 1,000 feet that put them up around 70% of what of the numbers that we required. We put a provision into the agreement with them that 5 years after the building was fully occupied, that they could come back to us and ask if they needed to continue to lease that extra parking. They've come back to us and demonstrated that they don't need it, and we have released them from that agreement. So when we came to an agreement with that developer, it was looking forward to a time when people didn't own as many cars. And they came forward and said, we don't need to build this much infrastructure. As we've all discussed, parking is incredibly expensive. Here is an instance where we have 100 empty spaces, a wasting asset directly across the alley, and then 175 empty spaces within 1,000 feet, a wasting asset. Why would we require HAC to build these extra units, which would come, as they've just said, at an extraordinary cost to build them underground, when literally across the alley are 100 units that they can access? So when I balance this out and see that there is possible to have this leasing agreement for additional parking spaces across the alley or at E2, I don't think that outweighs. I mean, there is a solution to this parking agreement. That does not outweigh, to me, the value of 51 affordable units for seniors in this location. As I don't want to go on too long, but this location means is so walkable for seniors. It's near our downtown. They will have access to public transportation. That's exactly where seniors want to live. So when I look at this, I look at the market rate portion of this building is rental. So if you are someone like the renters who moved in at Main and Chicago, which is a very nice, expensive building, they didn't need a parking space. And enough of them didn't need a parking space that the developer came back to the city and said, release us from this agreement. And we did. So if you're moving into one of these market rate units, you're going to know what the parking is like in the area. And you're going to decide whether you want to walk the 1,000 feet over to E2, or whether, if that's the case, then maybe you'll rent an E2 rather in this new building. So the market sorts itself out, and I don't think that it's worth scuttling this really important, innovative project over 12 parking spaces. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of, if not all, of Councilmember Wynn's comments there. I do generally agree that the city council shouldn't necessarily be in the business of mandating parking spots for private developers. I think, as Councilmember Nguyen pointed out, the private market can sort itself out in many regards, and folks who need the parking will move there, and folks who don't will choose somewhere else. I wonder, though, if a similar agreement that Councilmember Nguyen mentioned for Chicago Avenue, I forget the name of that building, the Main? I don't know. If a similar agreement is appropriate here to, have a requirement of renting a certain number of units and then allowing them to come back in a certain time frame, and if they determine that they don't need the units, then we can release them from that requirement. So I don't know if that's appropriate, but also I am not a developer, nor am I a psychologist, but I do wonder, just as another aspect of the development, which isn't necessarily what we're here about now, but the reduction of the public areas in the unit is not something I'm super happy about, but again, that's not, again, the private, you guys can sort that out yourselves. I think there are plenty of studies that show, as far as longevity and health, that your interaction with other human beings is one of the top factors for that. So I'd love to see public areas in all buildings that come before us. With that, I think I'll be supporting the changes here. It makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, I don't think we can compare Maine and Chicago with the Perlman building and the needs of the Perlman residents. I'm really disconcerted. I have to say a little bit sickened by what I sense of a real lack of regard for the residents of the Perlman building. I feel like there's a serious disconnection among most of the people supporting this development, a lack of consideration, a lack of outreach. For someone to say that these two residents who spoke tonight, or three, that's the small crowd of neighbors that represent opposition is disingenuous. Folks who have supported this have been to meetings where they've seen an outpouring of the residents of the Perlman building very upset about this. And to suggest that because maybe they don't all have access to the internet, or maybe they can't get here in wheelchairs, and to say that, that they represent that, I'm sorry, but that's just not being honest. And I am very concerned. They moved into that building knowing that they had open space, a parking lot, trees. They're losing that, and no one's concerned about that. And what about one accessible parking space? This is not the same as Maine and Chicago, Alderman Nguyen. So absolutely, I think we need more accessible spaces. I'm very disappointed that we've gone down to 34 units at 60% or below in the AMI. The Housing Authority of Cook County is the most eligible for LIHTC credits, and everybody knows that. It originally started out with many more units, and then it eventually merged into a high-rise with mostly market-rate units. So yeah, I really am. I feel very badly. There are no amenities. I feel like this building, if it's going to go up, I ask that first that there be more accessible parking spaces, that we take into deep consideration, and that staff advocate for the residents of the Perlman building, and that we demand more accessible parking spaces, and that we also expect some amenity, that they can enjoy some amenity in that building, and that it not be entirely off limits to them when they're losing their open space and their parking space. A wasting asset. I'm sorry, this is just a wasting asset. I wouldn't say that to the residents who live there. They have a right to, they chose to move there for everything that it's worth. So I don't think they would consider it just a wasting asset. I know we all want more heads on beds, and I really am disgusted by that, and I've heard a lot of that sentiment, not about the people who are actually living there, and I'm really getting sickened by it. I really am, and I'd like to see this held until we can appropriately advocate for the residents of the Perlman building, get more accessible spaces, and do an independent parking study ourselves to ensure that we are doing our best by them. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I make one clarification? Sure. Councilmember Kelly, I was not at all referring to the residents of Perlman, the Perlman building, as wasting asset. I
said the parking lot you were referring to. I'm aware of that, but I'm saying for them it's not a wasting asset.
That's not what I said. I said the empty parking spaces at the Link and at E2. are empty, wasting assets.
Yeah, and this isn't for students. You're talking about, like, these are senior citizens, and you're acting like, oh, they can just walk 7 blocks away and go get a parking space. I mean, come on, these are senior citizens and many who are disabled. So to just say we're going to open up spaces, over at the link, I mean, it's amazing to me, the regard or lack of regard for the residents of the Pearlman.
Also, I'd like a point of clarification. Is there some prohibition for the residents of the Pearlman to use any of the amenities in the new building?
Stated many times that, yes, that will be off
No,
limits.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Minacchio.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So what the question is, will the new building be accessible to people who don't live there? Is that the question?
The question is, will the residents of the Pearlman have access to the amenities in the new building?
So if we're talking about the building itself, the main amenity in the building itself is going to be a rooftop deck, and that will be available to people who live in the Emerson. But I would like to point out that we are creating significant new open space at the Pearlman, and connecting it, I think, to the community very well, and connecting it to the Pearlman very well. So certainly Pearlman residents and all residents of Evanston are going to be welcome to the amenity spaces in the exterior, which are going to be pretty elaborate. But in terms of the building itself and inside the building, it's a totally separate building. It's just the standard procedure is that what's built in the building is generally made available to residents. But in terms of the parking, because it's been talked about, every single resident of the Pearlman is going to have a free parking space on site still. So that's very important to point out.
And
as well.
Are the parking spaces in the new building going to be designated for the affordable units?
So there's going to be a number of exterior spaces that will be designated for the residents of Pearlman. We did a study that shows that 18 residents have vehicles and they need parking, and they will all be accommodated. The underground spots will be leased, so it's anticipated that those will be leased by the market rate tenants.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Reed.
I'm just curious, is the cost of the parking spots completely separated from the cost of, so let's say I'm a 55-year-old renter in the building and I don't own a car. Built into your scheme of how you guys are financing the building through rent, is someone who does not own a car technically paying part of the cost of the parking garage and the parking structure?
No.
Or is that separated completely?
Separated.
Okay. Thank you.
So there was a comment made during public comment about the link and its new proposal for the property to the north, I guess, of its existing building. And perhaps this is a question for Johanna. Do we know? And the mention was made that that building was going to be relying on the parking in the existing link building. Do you happen to know anything about that proposal?
So a little bit less than a month ago, the developers, Focus Development, submitted a zoning analysis for an entirely new building at the north of the existing Link property. So we're finishing up the review of that and gave them some feedback on it. So that's very, very, very preliminary. I think it was just last week that it appeared on the weekly zoning report.
But have you looked at it in enough detail to know whether it's providing parking?
I'll double check right now. I'll open the folder.
Okay. Because it would obviously be a lot better for the residents of the Emerson building to be able to just walk across the alley and take advantage of the currently empty spaces at the link. Councilmember Kelly.
I mean, I think we don't know what the impact is going to be regarding parking at the link with this potential proposal. I ask that we hold this until the city can do due diligence on the parking situation and also in terms of accessible parking. Or table or whatever it is we have to do.
And I guess I just had one other point to make about parking. I'm looking at I guess it's the ordinance that we passed in November 2020, and it says, prior to issuance of the building permit, the applicant shall provide a long-term lease for a minimum of 50 parking spaces within 1,000 feet of the subject property. And so at some point, somebody would determine just how far away the E2 building is to make sure it's within the 1,000 feet, or have we actually looked into that distance?
My understanding is that it's a lot line to lot line measurement, so it would be 1,000 feet.
It is within, okay.
And to clarify, that is a part of our city code, the 1,000 feet. It's not some arbitrary number we picked. It's part of our city code.
Okay. Councilmember Burns and then Councilmember Kelly.
Councilmember Ravel, can you repeat? You said they have to have that in place at what time?
Right.
At what point?
Prior to the issuance of the building permit, the applicant must provide a long-term lease for a minimum of 50 parking spaces within 1,000 feet.
So even if we approve this today, that still would apply, what you just read?
That requirement would still apply.
And then for the IHO ordinance, and Council, this might be a question for you. One, affordable in our IHO ordinance means it's spelled out in our definitions of low income, middle income, and moderate income. Am I understanding that correctly? Which is a pretty big range from, looks like anywhere from 50% to maybe 120%.
So, Sarah, why don't you answer the primer on IHO here?
And then Sarah, before you, the next question is, I think one of the community members talked about as because there's no kind of local preference or priority that they wouldn't be in compliance of our IHO, but I can't find. That's something that is truly important to me. Folks have heard me talk about that, but I don't think we have a local preference requirement in the IHO ordinance. So I just wanted to provide some clarity for the community member that mentioned that. Although it sounds like, which I'm happy to hear that I think Rich Minacchio said that they're actually going to go through our IHO list, which is exclusively Evanston residents. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if that is the case, at least for those 17 units that are priced moderately, that's a great thing. But so I just want to get a few questions on that as well. Is the IHO list Evanston exclusive, Evanston resident exclusive? It is not.
No.
Okay.
You can't do that. Let me first explain the IHO. This property exceeds the requirements for affordability of the IHO simply by having 20% affordable units that are below the requirement of the IHO, which is 60% of area median. So that is, by our IHO, a residential multifamily building that may have the physical characteristics of a covered development, but has affordability restrictions that exceed it, so it is not directly covered by the IHO. And the reason this is in the IHO is to accommodate things like different financing structures that get us greater levels of affordability than our IHO. Those 34 units will have project-based support. So that means, for all intents and purposes, they function like public housing. The tenants have to have incomes below 50% of the area median, But many of them that are in these sorts of units have incomes significantly below, and the tenant pays 30% of their income, and the voucher picks up the rest. So that's an operating subsidy. It's not a development subsidy, it's an operating subsidy. And you may recall that in the Anne Rainey Apartments, which is a 60-unit building, they are getting some project-based support units, but it is a very, very important way of taking care of our lowest income seniors. What Mr. Minacchio said is they do site-based waiting lists for all their properties with project-based units. Recently, the Housing Authority opened the wait list for the project-based unit in the Anne Rainey Apartments. And we helped, for all the people that we had on our interested parties list, we got information out to them that they needed to sign up for that. And some of Audrey Thompson's staff actually helped people literally sign up for that. So when he says that that's what you do, this is what we do. We get them lined up and ready to apply. Can we say that it's only for Evanston residents? No, we cannot. Now, the 17 units are different. Those are going to come off of the IHO waiting list because the Housing Authority doesn't have, that isn't something controlled by their requirements for their process, because those are, in essence, not affordable units by the project-based support. So those residents or those tenants will come off of the wait list that Community Partners for Affordable Housing maintains, and Evanston residents or former residents or people probably not as applicable for this who live outside of Evanston but work in Evanston get preference for that. You know, this is a 55-plus building. It isn't a 62-plus building, so that might be a benefit too. So that's the difference, but there will be.
So those are the three groups in the IHO list?
Right.
Okay. So
What AMI are you
It could be
referring to?
people that live outside Evanston currently but work in Evanston. Okay. And then that just lost me. Since you said AMI, it'll come back to me. That's it for now.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
The 17 that you're referring to, what is the AMI on those?
The AMI is between 80 and 120%. So these
So
are
not affordable.
a middle income level that the only time that there has ever been any development subsidy for anything at that income level was the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which was to try to keep neighborhoods from completely failing by getting a mixed income in there, and that's what we did in our two lowest income census tracts. But this is a income level that we very much need in our community. 3 years ago, our Age-Friendly Evanston Task Force did a whole market study that was presented to council, and one of the things was middle-income residents who want to see older residents who want to be able to downsize and move into a building can't afford the continuing care communities, and they really can't afford the other new buildings that are being built. So this specifically addresses that need as well.
I do remember my question real quick. So the 60% AMI requirement, is that fairly new? Because I thought we had inclusionary housing units downtown that are at 80% AMI. Is this
We have a mix. And some of the ones we have downtown were because two of the buildings that have inclusionary units had negotiated agreements, and that is the Albion and the Avador, because they actually proposed to pay the full fee in lieu, which
No,
was
the Albion
eligible
did
at the
not.
time.
The Albion did not pay the full fee. They only gave us They only gave us 1/3. They did not.
No,
pay.
they didn't pay a fee in lieu at all.
Right.
No,
And
what
they
I-
only gave us 1/3 of the required, the 27 units that they were required to give us at 60% or below.
Okay, so
At the time, council asked both developers to make a proposal as what they could do, and they were accepted by council. as an alternative equivalent, therefore they are
Sarah,
in
Sarah, at the time,
compliance.
the IHO allowed developers to pay the entire fee in lieu instead of providing on-site. The IHO that we have applied today is different. There are different requirements. So at the time the Albion proposed paying the fee in lieu, the council found that they wanted on-site units, and this was the proposal in lieu of the entire fee. But the Albion was prepared to pay the entire fee.
Wait, let's be clear, though. On a planned development, we could have accepted, they only gave us 1/3 of the 27 units at 60%. We could have said, we'll take 1/3 and you have to pay in lieu. That was our choice not to make that demand. With a planned development, we could ask for 3 times our IHO if I want. I think we need to stop acting like they have these rights, because this was the council's choice. And with staff's recommendation, which was a horrible recommendation, they gave them, in fact, 1/3. They let them get away with only putting in 1/3 of the required IHO units at the time with no payment in lieu.
Right.
And all you had to do is say no.
Just to be clear, because
All you had to do is say no, but we did
Councilmember
it.
Kelly,
So,
but
yeah,
with
and clear
respect,
on that was your
that
choice.
issue is not before us today. I just
No, but
wanted-
I just wanted to clarify
I understand.
I just want to correct for the record on what Sarah was saying.
No, I understand. Thank you for that.
But we've also amended our IHO, so to avoid the kind of situation that we had with the Albion.
But just to be clear, Director Knight, so basically they were saying, look, we'll pay the opt-out fee, and we said, instead of doing that, can we agree on these terms? And not we,
Correct.
but the past council approved that agreement. Okay, that's all I wanted to.
And then we reviewed the IHO and made it much, much stricter.
And we're actually, we must review and update our IHO every 3 years, and in 2022, we're going to be doing that again, so we'll be.
Yeah, we have one of the weakest IHOs around, just for the record. Where developers come to town and they think that they really are only expected to put 5% on site. That's outrageous.
So, Councilmember Burns, did that answer your questions about the income and everything?
Yes, all my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Great, okay, thank you, Sarah. Are there other questions or comments from members of the council committee? Councilmember Nguyen.
Since I have the latest development that is being developed in my ward at 1012 Chicago Avenue, I would like to point out that the developer for that project never, ever asked us to reduce the percentage of affordable housings in the project, or to touch or alter the requirements that we had. So my experience, which is real life experience, discussing development with a real life developer who is now going to go into the ground on Chicago Avenue, is that they were prepared to follow our IHO.
And Johanna, did you find out anything about the new link proposal?
Yes, they do have parking. They will be building parking.
Okay, so it seems likely there would still be available parking in the current link building for.
Right, I think the number I saw was there were 88, when they came to reduce their required parking, so they could put 88 available to the public. I think that that is not contemplated to pull from, the new development's not contemplated at this point to pull from that number.
So,
just one more thing.
Sure.
Just because I want to be upfront with this, because I don't want this to come back later, and I want to be fully transparent. So I am 100% committed to testing whether or not local preferences are constitutional. It is a risk. It's something that could be denied, and it could be denied. This project is a little different because I don't think they're going for federal tax credits, and it's gray area. It's something that I'm investigating now with some partners from HODC and others, but it is something that I'm going to fight for. And so to respect that point, Councilmember Kelly, that you're making, I don't want to come back with another deal that we're working on and say, oh yeah, it's important for this development, but it wasn't important for yours. I think it is important. It's a gray area. If Rich and others are saying, look, it can't be done, there's nothing that I can say right now to say it can be, because even the folks that are willing to take this up with me in our ward are saying it's great, but we'll give it a shot and see what happens. So, I just want to be fully transparent with that I am fully committed to seeing whether or not there's some latitude on the local preference, particularly, this is the difference, is that in the area that we're talking about in our ward, again, it's a census tract that is with 30, at least close to 30% are living below the poverty line. I don't know if that's the case in the subject area, but that is a difference. Our argument is going to say, look, the need is here. It's right here. It's in the community where this, building is being proposed to be built. Like, let us, so I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
Johanna, could you explain a little bit about accessibility? What % of parking spaces, what is it, like 1 per 20 spaces?
I don't have the parking numbers. Megan, are you on, and can you answer that question?
I am on. Let me actually pull up the
We'll give you a
chart
quick
itself.
second.
Are you asking the requirement?
Councilmember Kelly, can you repeat the question?
I'd like to know what is the requirement in terms of percentage of accessible parking spaces per, I think it's like 1 to 20, correct?
It is not that exact amount. I'm pulling up the chart now specifically to speak to that. But for the first 20 spaces, there is 1 space that is required, but as you increase the number of parking spaces, then there are additional parking spaces that are then required from that. Hold on a second, I'm pulling that up specifically.
It's already got.
So for the accessible parking spaces, as I mentioned before, for the first 20 spaces, there's 1 space required. If you get to the next section for between 21 and 50 parking spaces, there are 2 accessible spaces that are required. And then it steps up from there, 51 to 75 total parking spaces, you need 3 accessible parking spaces. So it's not quite going by 20, but there's a chart that specifically says for the number of total parking spaces that are provided on site, there's a certain number of accessible parking spaces, that are required.
And on-site, how many do we have on-site?
There's 2.
There are 2 new parking spaces.
2 accessible spaces.
They have a shared accessibility aisle. The existing parking spaces that are on the site now were approved to be moved to the alley. So total there would be 4 parking spaces. For accessible parking spaces.
But on-site in the Emerson, there's 2 accessible spaces? Is that what I'm understanding? Underground?
There are 2 in the building, right, Megan?
Right, for the underground parking. It is 2 parking spaces that have a shared accessibility aisle.
So is this, there should be 3, correct? According to your numbers?
No, for this particular development, since this would meet that 21 to 50 range. So they would need to have 2 spaces.
I thought it was 71 that we're talking about spaces.
These are the ones that are on site, right, Megan? The calculation is based on the provided on site.
Right, so on-site parking spaces.
So
this is in the range of 21 to 50, so 2.
So because we're
accessible
sending
parking
people away, then we don't count those spaces because they have to walk to another parking lot? I just want to understand, like in terms of accessibility. Again, I'm really, really imploring my colleagues up here to get the best we can get. I'm not going to oppose this building. It's going up. I understand that. But I'm sorry, but the residents of the Perlman have lost their parking space. They've lost their outdoor space. And as we now understand, they will not have access to the amenities of the building. I just want to ensure that they are, in fact, getting what they need. And these are people, these are not students, right? These are people in wheelchairs. These are people that have healthcare workers that come to visit them. The parking is important for seniors. So I just want to be clear. It seems to me that we need another space on site. I don't think it's right that we can say, well, there's a total number of spaces and some of them are going to be located over at the E2 and therefore.
I is my understanding that this is the Illinois Accessibility Code. This isn't the City of Evanston Accessibility Code. This is the Illinois Accessibility Code. So,
Can the applicant tell us mean, who's on the call right now? Can you tell us how many accessible spaces are in the new building and how many accessible spaces will be available to the Perlman residents after the new building is built?
So much.
Well, so there will be two accessible spaces off the alley right next to the Perlman building. And there'll be two, per plans that have been submitted, two accessible spaces in the underground parking garage.
How many accessible spaces are available to the Perlman residents right now?
Two.
Okay, so that number is not changing.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And I read in the Plan Commission notes or minutes and things that the applicant's going to provide parking for any Perlman resident with a car free of charge. Is that something that, I'm not sure if that was a verbal commitment or if that's in writing?
It was a verbal commitment.
And that's going to be, we'll put that in writing? Question mark. And also that the applicant will pay for the caregiver parking at the link.
The applicant will provide for needed caregiver parking based on an assessment of need at the time. We cannot guarantee it will be at the link. There may be caregiver spaces that are carved out in the underground parking. There may be other places nearby that the housing authority can secure spaces for caregivers. We will. The commitment was to provide to provide a best effort for caregiver spaces based on on-site resources and convenient off-site resources.
And I can elaborate a little on that, Councilmember Nguyen, and thanks, Bill. Yeah, I made the commitment that we will certainly accommodate caregivers. Now, if sometimes the caregiver agreements, they have funds to pay for parking, and if they do, we would certainly want them to access those funds. But if there's no funding available for parking for caregivers, we will cover that.
Right, so maybe that HAC pays for whatever parking costs are associated with the caregivers.
Okay, so basically, and you're committing to leasing up to 50 spaces at E2, and then you refer to 70 spaces that are currently available at the link. But I guess I'd like to see leasing of spaces at the link, given how much closer and more convenient it is for the building, for the new building.
Yes, and this is all fluid. The link is not ready to commit to off-site parking for our building at this point in time. And from year to year, availability at various buildings will shift. I think we can obtain a multi-year commitment from the E2, given how many spaces they have, and it's in Housing Authority's interest to accommodate all resident parking needs so that they can maintain a full building and provide for their residents' needs. So the thing is that this is a fluid situation. We believe that eventually we will get commitment from the Link building. I don't think they want to commit right now because they are looking at some options for additional development. And I think when that plays out, they'll be in a position to lease us whatever remaining spaces they have.
And if I could just add to that, as Bill said, it's in our best interest. And I think the council members obviously get this too, that we want to lease parking or provide parking as close to our building as we can. Exactly. It's just in our best interest. So we're going to make every effort to do that. But in any event, we're going to comply with the city ordinance.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
Can you just, you say there's two accessible places for the Perlman off the alley. What is that? Can you describe what that means, off of the alley?
Yes, so there are a series of spaces currently on the east side of the alley between the Perlman building and the edge of the alley. Those exist now. The existing handicap or accessible spaces are in the parking lot, which will have to be relocated. They'll be relocated to the alley, and some spaces in the alley will be reconfigured to make the required width for the accessible spaces.
Okay, so will that be, okay, so there will be some accommodations made then from the off the alley parking to make that a comfortable access? Because right now, obviously, the parking lot works very well for the residents who need the accessibility.
Yeah, and the alley spaces will work equally well, if not better, in terms of distance from the permanent building.
From entrances.
Okay, so is the committee ready to vote on, we have a motion to introduce this item to council this evening?
So may I just feel like there's still so many questions with regard, and it's not, I mean, with regard to the link, the development, and not really understanding what's going to be available there. And I think the city needs to do its own independent research on this, on the parking situation. So I would like to see that happen first. And this isn't a delay tactic. It's about respecting the possible outcomes that we're not aware of, and doing due diligence.
Councilmember Nguyen.
This is for introduction, correct?
Right.
I think that those questions can be answered. I think that we should move forward and move this to the council, and then get some of those questions answered. As I said before, this is 51 affordable units in our downtown. The only other place where we have that number is in the building on Howard Street that was built by the Council for Jewish Elderly, which is a miracle building too. But I mean, this is 34 low-income units right there in our downtown. We don't have anything else like that, and no other proposal that's going to come forward that remotely reaches that number.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we can understand Councilmember Kelly's concerns, and I think particularly the concern regarding providing enough on-site parking for disabled folks makes sense, particularly if it's, we're using a calculation of if they did put in, some standard of parking, here's how many spots they'd have, and just are they meeting that? I think that's big, but outside of that, I think this can move forward. And just point of clarification. So I've seen it happen both ways, where an item has been for introduction at committee and then it's gone directly to council for introduction and then for action, or are we anticipating 2 readings at this committee?
At this point, we're contemplating sending it on to council this evening.
Sending it to council for introduction tonight at
For introduction,
council.
right, and then it would come up for action at the subsequent council meeting.
Which is December, there used to be a
13th.
calendar, Wally used to.
Yeah, December 13th.
Okay, okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we're ready to vote. If you'd like to call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
6-1.
So what was that?
6-1. I'm sorry, 6-1.
6-1, okay. So thank you, everybody. And I think now I can call us adjourned.
This is minor, but I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So the chair, we can't, if you're chairing, you can't make the motion. You can only second. That's what I was told. And it's minor, but because you made a motion for one of the items. I can't remember which one. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right.
Yes, correct. The chair is not supposed to make a motion
So I don't know if we want to
second.
redo that, whichever one it was, but it's minor, but I want to make sure that I know what the rules are around it.
Okay,
Yes, what was the motion that the chair?
I can't even, I
It was
think.
P,
I
it was
can't
for
remember.
P2.
Was it P2? Okay.
Then I'll move introduction.
I will second.
we'll call the roll.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
All right. So now, we are adjourned, and council will start at 10 minutes past 7.